It's what's going on in that person's nervous system that you don't have to know as the landlord in this scenario, because you're not a psychologist, you're not their therapist. You don't need to know all the details, but you just need to know that there is something going on, and it's really not about you.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. This week, I have Robert Grigore. Grigore, sorry about that.
It's all good.
Your name, man.
Grigore, whatever.
Yeah, who is a clinical counselor. He also is the host of the mental health show with Robert Grigore. And basically, we've got you on the show today to sort of cover in about the mental side of being a landlord and real estate in general, because as many people know, it can be really stressful. There's a lot of things that go on. So I figured this way we'll sort of delve into it a bit and see what's happening. So Welcome to the show there.
Thank you for having me.
Couple questions before we get into it. How long you been doing this for? What brought you to it? How did you get here?
So I've been in private practice. I own my own it's Canada-wide clinic going across Canada. We're coast to coast to coast.
Okay.
It didn't start off that way. I was a solo practice for many years, so over 10 years. I sort of stumbled my way into counseling. I didn't even think that was where I was going to go.
Yeah.
I was going to actually, in my first undergrad was measuring the humidity and paper density in a paper stack. That's how I describe it as. It was a really fancy title, but turned out that wasn't what I wanted to do, and I just got drunk and wasted that whole year, and then found psychology off the back end somehow, and then landed into it. It turned out I'm a really good fit for that. And the rest is kind of history, and specialize in EMDR and all kinds of things, and it's a whole story there. But it turns out that I love counseling and good at it, and over 1,000 clients later, I'm still doing it.
Oh, well, it seems like a good thing. 1,000 clients is a lot of clients, so
congrats. Well, thank you. Yeah.
So I guess one of the things that we wanted to touch in on that does come up, especially we hear all the time about the battles that happen between landlords and tenants, which is kind of interesting because most of the time it's not like that. You only hear about planes that crash, of course.
Right.
You hear about the thousands of other ones that are fine.
Yes.
But situations will come up that can get a little hot. And so I guess I just wanted to touch base about what are some good de-escalation tactics to ease it up. Because obviously, if you're going to be a landlord and tenant, or even when you're doing purchases, realtor to realtor and purchaser and seller, all of that, things can get off the rails sometimes. What's a good way to slow that down and not have a conflict?
Yes. So first I'll say that I'm not a realtor myself, so I don't have that side of things. Yeah. But I've worked with many realtors in my clinic, and other types of high performing professionals, CEOs. It doesn't matter. And in terms of conflict, some of the things that we're really looking at that really help to de-escalate, the very first thing I'd always say to all my clients is validation. Mm-hmm. Validating the other person immediately. It doesn't mean you validate their opinion, right? They call you a jerk, you were right, that's correct. That's not what I mean. I mean that we're validating that. Let's say they're really angry, you validate that. Clearly they seem really angry, and you have all the right to be angry right now.
Okay.
Right? That's a validation. That makes the other person feel better. From there, you want to establish that you're on the same team. Right. Okay. Even though that, you might be against each other and trying, on both ends of the deal, you're still a commonality. You're still trying to make a deal happen. Right? You're still negotiating. And, from my perspective, anyway, I think that a good negotiation when both parties feel like they got what they wanted.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right? They're both satisfied.
Yes, absolutely. It's funny you mentioned about that with the negotiation. I've taken some formal training for that, and collaborative is generally the best way to go. And it's interesting just because on being on both sides, one of the most known competitive negotiators is Trump. Yeah. Just a winner and a loser, right? Yeah, right. And obviously that's not the best method, as we've clearly seen. People are very polarized about it. So yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that collaborative is the good way to go.
Yeah.
So now after you validate them, what's the next step?
Yeah. So in establishing, whether you're on the same team, I usually use those words or a very, hey, man, we're on the same team, right? Just to make sure that we're on the same team. We both I want this. You're wanting this. So you kind of want to ensure that what the other person's looking for. Sometimes, some people aren't going to be quite as outgoing saying what they're looking for. You can kind of guess, I think, we both want the best deal for our client. We both want, the best deal possible for us. We both want, to make, somebody happy, essentially. So you wanted to establish that we're on the same team, because once you make that link in a negotiation, whether that be with a tenant or a landlord or another agent or your spouse, you want to make sure that you're on the same team.
Yeah.
So that's really, really important. And then the next part that I often say is to when you're speaking to the other person, if the negotiation or if it's going, fairly well, you might not have to point this out. But if it's going really, the person's rude or they're really aggressive, then you have to set some sort of boundaries.
Okay.
Right? Because you can't just show up and be like, yeah, I'll take whatever you're gonna, dish at me, because that's not appropriate either.
Yeah, for sure. Plus, you'll not feel good about yourself.
Right.
Turn yourself into a punching bag. Right?
Totally. And then you have a reputation at the same time. There's lots of factors that come into play here. So when you're going to set a boundary, a boundary isn't just a limit. A boundary is a limit with a consequence.
Okay.
Right. So you don't say you can't speak to me that way. That's just a limit. We have to say, if you speak to me this way, then this is going to happen. So you don't just say that. What you say is something like, when you use those particular terms, this part has to be very practical. Okay. Right. So it's almost like word for word. Hey, like when you called and you just screamed at me, right? You can't just say, you can't assume what the other person's thinking, so we can't go into the realm of mind reading. You have to think like a lawyer would think. Practical evidence, like if you were recording it, you can go back and that's exactly what they said, kind of thing. So when you called me and you said X, Y, and Z, right, that made me feel blank. Okay. So you have to kind of determine what type of relationship this is too. If this is like a long-term relationship, like you want to work, you're going to be talking to this person for maybe many years on several different deals, and that's a relationship you want to maintain. So it's very different than if it's a one-off and somebody's just trying to, so you don't have to maybe go into such depth. But if you're really thinking about, hey, I want to have a good relationship with you long term here and make sure that we satisfy our clients and so on for many years, we want to outline that. So that's part of the goal. I think we're on the same team. That's the goal. Is that what you want too? And asking that question, is that what you want as well? That sort of links the person's integrity, in my opinion, up with, with what you're doing. Because 2 seconds later, people are going to say, oh yeah, no, I'm not going to act that way anymore. Yeah. So if you say, is that what you want as well? Then they're likely to be more, malleable for that conversation. Yeah.
Which is good, because like, as you're talking about, most of the time, especially with landlords and tenants, that is probably going to be a couple of years. So, like, you don't want to piss in each other's boot because it's going to get real awkward.
Yeah, that's the goal, right? And especially in today's economy, a lot of people are renters. Way more than I do about this. But I think we're looking at more long term, renting for a lot of regards, and
especially because the rent goes up if you move generally.
Yeah, correct. So you don't want to piss off the landlord, and you also want to kind of know what the like on the flip side, it's also be really good to know if the landlord's thinking of selling sometime soon. They give you lots of time to think about it, perhaps, so if you have a really good relationship with that person, then, you're going to have a long runway to get, your needs met.
Oh, absolutely. And that's one of the things that I preach in all of our previous shows, is that you need to nourish a tenancy. Like it has to, because you're in bed with each other for at least a year generally. So you want to make sure that everyone's respectful and you're good with each other because of this. And I think that's overlooked by a lot of things, because only, as I said earlier, that the only things you hear about it are the bad conflicts. And it's we have hundreds of units.
Yes.
I'd be pulling out my hair if it was all conflict.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So, it is about nourishing that. I absolutely agree. So now we've validated it. Then we've linked them together.
Yep.
What's
yeah.
next?
So you want to talk about the behavior that you're seeing, and then how what the feeling is from your side only, right?
Okay.
And so I work with a lot of couples as well, and so like when a couple's it's essentially the same thing. It's a relationship for a long-term relationship, just landlord and tenant. So a little bit not quite as intimate, but
at least it shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be anyway. That's correct. Talk to Haze about that. It is.
For that,
You talk about that. So, so you want to say, okay, so hey, so like when you called me up, and let's just say the door handle broke or something like that, right? And the tenant's screaming at the landlord or something. Like the landlord might say something like, hey, I can validate that you. So okay, clearly you're very angry. Mm-hmm. Which is okay. I feel better. There's actually something neurologically that happens that when we name it, we tame it. I think that's Brian Siegel, if I'm correct. And so it's something that brings the nervous system down a little bit.
Okay.
We actually, maybe I'll talk about this for a second. You got 3 different neurological states in everybody's nervous system. So we've got this green zone, this ventral vagal, calm, grounded, peaceful. This is where everybody wants to be, right? This is like you're on the beach, you're on a vacation, you're relaxed, everything's cool. There is a little bit of stress that you can have in that green zone and still operate very efficiently. Okay. That would be operating from your prefrontal cortex. You're able to use all of your faculties, and that's great, right? Yeah. Logic, reason, you can use all of them. Then you get more stress. Then we enter into that hyper aroused state, which is fight or flight. Most people have heard of that, right? Absolutely. So this is when people start to fly off the handle, or they're like, I got to get out of here. Like I don't like this place. I got to leave. And then they're already activated. We can talk about why that happens later too. And then if the stress increases, even though, if you feel like you can run or you can fight off this stressor, you still feel like you're in control. But if the stress increases more than the ability that you feel you have to handle the situation, now you enter into a whole different territory called dorsal vagal shutdown. Okay. So this is hypoarousal. This is like when people will literally freeze or maybe even faint. You hear like narcolepsy happens up here, or
it's like wave straight panic.
It's past the point of panic. Yeah, it's dissociating. It's like you're in a whole other state, right? And this is depression territory happens here. Suicidal ideation happens here. Addictions happen here. This is we can probably talk for hours about that. And believe me, I have and I can. So I will spare you. But the point that I'm making is that you want to really know kind of where the other person's state is when you're talking to them. So if it's a door handle that's broken, right, and the landlord's getting an angry phone call from this tenant, and the tenant's slurring and spitting and it's like really, really angry. Well, first we have to recognize this person's not quite in that complete shutdown, but they're in that yellow zone. Yeah. So we want to de-escalate. So again, validate. Hey, I can tell you're very angry. You have a right to. It's a handle. It's an important part of the house. I totally get why you'd be angry right now. Mm-hmm. Okay, now that person's feeling heard and seen already. Yeah. Now it's feeling a little bit better. Then you might just get away with that's enough, and then you can just continue to tell you what, I'll be over and such and such time. Is that okay for you? And that might be good enough. If they're not de-escalating at that point enough, then you have to start setting some boundaries, because you don't want to be answering that phone with the person screaming at you every time, right? It's not okay. So they say, hey, so I get that you're angry. You have all the right in the world to be angry. However, calling me names. We're on the same team, right? Like I'm your landlord. You're like we're on the same team. Calling me names is making me feel disrespected, and you might try not to use. This is where people's emotional intelligence comes into play, because not everybody knows. Like I'm feeling invisible right now. That's not. I don't know what exactly does that mean, man. So you might, but a lot of people know disrespected, which I also find can sometimes be a trigger word. Sometimes the disrespect that can trigger trauma from people's past. So that's an iffy one. But you might say something like, I'm feeling really uncomfortable. Okay. That is a safe, an excellent word in most situations. People don't need to know exactly what your version of uncomfortable is, but they know what that means. Yeah, it means it's not awesome. So it's not cool, right? I'm feeling really uncomfortable right now with how you're speaking to me with those words that you're using. Mm-hmm. So then you have to say, so what I prefer is if you were to just tell me the facts, tell me what you need, and we'll come to a solution together. Yeah. Okay. And if we can't, then we'll have to, this is where the boundary comes in, the consequence, right? If we can't do that, then and the first consequence could be very simple. Like I'm just gonna hang up the phone. Yeah, I get you. Right, and then we'll talk later. But if it's a regular occurrence, right, then the boundary might have to be greater. Right. Here's where the laws and everything probably about much more than I would. But what you are allowed to do as a landlord, right? But maybe you get a mediator to deal with them instead from now on.
Yeah, or send a different property manager or something. There are other ways to cook a chicken, basically.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So those are some of the ways that you could just sort of, because you're not really, when you really get down to it, you're not really talking about the door handle. It's something entirely different.
Yeah.
Right. It's what's going on in that person's nervous system that you don't have to know as a landlord in this scenario, because you're not a psychologist, you're not their therapist. You don't need to know all the details, but you just need to know that there is something going on, and it's really not about you.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. Right.
Usually, unless you're a slumlord.
We haven't fixed that
we
for
talk
2 years.
That.
No problem.
I would do the door handle, but the bed bugs, you're on your own on that one.
So yeah, I mean, guess that will basically cool down the situation, and then you just sort of work from there.
For the most part, there's a really great book out there by a guy named Chris Voss.
Okay.
Have you heard of it before? It's called Never Split the Difference.
I've seen the cover, but I've never read it.
Such a good book. So the guy's, if I remember correctly, he's an FBI negotiator, retired FBI negotiator, hostage situation. So he would come in guns to the head, banks held up, like very life and death situation. And he would come in with something he called tactical empathy.
Okay.
So that's the same thing I would have, somebody in this situation going to tactical empathy. And what they do in those situations, they don't come in like, you're going to jail, you're gonna die, like we got a sniper on you right now, we're gonna take you out. They're not gonna go that, because that might trigger panic exactly. Come in and the voice changes. Wow. So it seems like there is, a lot that you're angry about. Tell me about that. So the voice changes and things can change. So when you're in a high stress situation, if you slow down your voice and he calls it the late night FM DJ, and I love that because it's so true, right? Because it just has it's a subconscious effect on your nervous system, just calming you down. Also, hand movements can do really well too. So if you happen to be face to face with somebody, the phone's a little different here, but if you're face to face and somebody's really aggressive, there's a couple of things you can do that bypasses the left brain, because if they're in that yellow zone, what I call the yellow zone, fight or flight, they are not using their full faculties at this point. They've literally flipped their lid. That's really what it's called. It's a great thing you can look up. But yeah, hand signals. I found that it bypasses all of that, and it just works on the right brain. So this is the more imaginative, creative. You know the picture is, you know what it means, but you don't exactly know the name of it. That's how you can know the difference between left brain, right brain.
Okay.
So on the right, hand signals. Whoa! I always think about like calming down and like a wild, angry horse.
Yeah.
Whoa. And if you're moving away a little bit, that's calming a little bit for the person. Just unconsciously knows that they're kind of stepping too far.
Yeah, I got you. So like a distancing
you're distancing. You're getting a little bit further. You can turn your body a little bit like that, so you're not like right on. That's a threat, perhaps. So there's a lot of little subtle things that you can do. Sometimes I've even found like putting your hand directly like that, if they're really angry, that could be triggering as well too, because people have seen all kinds of things in their past where that could trigger up other memories, and then you're looking at a whole nother de-escalation that has to happen. But
plus you're kind of entering that personal space.
Exactly.
Almost, right?
Whoa. Yeah.
I got you. So yeah, I mean, I'll definitely techniques to take into account. It's interesting that you say about the different levels between it and that, because like I can visualize that like a triangle almost. You know what I mean? Up, right?
Correct.
So, it's definitely some good de-escalation tactics. Now, what you had talked about before, obviously, the people, landlord or purchaser, or whatever you may be, you're not going to go and delve into their private life. It's not your place. Yeah. But for trying to like uncover stuff like that, for instance, the door handle, someone's flying off the handle. What would be some not offensive ways to sort of draw out a little bit more? Because like it's not a rational thing for someone to lose their marbles over just a door handle. There's probably something else going on. Is there any methods to sort of draw that out a little bit? Not ask them point blank, are you upset because your mom yelled at you yesterday? Like, that would be weird. But like, is there any ways to kind of draw that out? Because I think it would probably work in with that de-escalation. Understand you're upset about the door handle. Like, is there anything more or something along these lines, right? Like,
yeah, I think it's important to sort of know too how far you want to go with this person, right? Because if it's a long-term relationship, then you want to be very careful with the boundaries. You don't want to ask too far, but you kind of I also think about this. There's it depends on the timing. So I also say strike when the iron's cold, not when the iron's hot. Because if you're like, hey, let's address this right now. What's going on for you, really? In that they're already really heightened, maybe not a good idea.
Yeah. So probably add to it, I guess. Yeah?
If you're going to you're probably going to call them tomorrow or the next day or something like that. So you do that initial, hey, let's get really angry and go through the whole steps that you said, and then you might say maybe we'll have a chat in the near future about this and figure how we can ensure that we can have a better relationship together.
Yeah.
And then the one that comes down the line, maybe 2 or 3 days later, is actually a really good window. About 72 hours is a window, so that the high stress is now, more or less worked through into long-term memory at this point, because the working memory pulls up all kinds of stuff that this is actually tied to. So, I mean, you really know there is more underneath the surface than the door handle. So then you can maybe talk at that point and say, hey, what's really going on for you? Is there some way that, is there something that you need maybe that I can, help facilitate perhaps, right? So like, you're not going to be their therapist, but maybe it's not, maybe it's, and this, I'm not sure, but maybe you can suggest something like, I've heard, certain types of, therapy is really helpful for this sort of thing. Or like, if you happen to have, a history that's not too close, that's too current, or like you said, like I had an uncle that had, some really strong issues with, anger, and they got help through blank services. Okay. And then, so that might be a way of just sort of shifting the responsibility there. But if it's say like in the middle of a negotiation, like, there's a lot of money on the line, or like, there's something really important. You might get away with asking questions that are open-ended questions, like, hey, what does that actually mean to you?
Yeah.
Like what for you exactly? What's so important about this particular home? Like, what's that backyard actually mean to you?
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I got you.
And what's the importance of that? Yeah. Yes or no is just a very short, there's no depth, but if you want people to expand, open-ended questions, like, what does that mean to you? How would your life be different if you had this? Or what would happen for you if you didn't get that?
Yeah. Yeah. Your BATNA is the best alternative to essentially not having the answer. Okay. Like, best alternative to not coming to a negotiated term, basically.
See, still learning. I like that. Thank you.
So it's a good way to go about that. So yeah, I guess asking those open-ended questions is a good way to draw out that stuff. Now, I guess we touched in on it. I don't know if there's any methods for this. When the market is very hot, which I think that we're probably going to be this spring, very busy, multiple offer situations, I've noticed that some people have this sort of ego, like, I must win, and go buck wild and spend $100,000 more than they need to, and it's all that, which eventually leads to some cognitive dissonance after. It's because it's like, should I have done that? Like, probably not. What are some methods to sort of address that? To people could kind of use that to figure out, is this just I need to win, or do I really want to spend that extra $100,000? Like, how can they determine this effectively? Because in the time, you're not thinking.
No, that's a really good point. So if you sort of think ahead, you imagine, okay, so what if I get into that situation? Once when the person is in that mode, they're operating under past experiences. Really, it comes down to negative beliefs. There's a voice in that person's head saying something about yourself or themselves, right? So going back to the question, what would it mean about you if they're my client, I would ask, so what does it mean about you if you didn't get the house?
Yeah.
right? And well, that's my dream house, and I'm going to raise my kids there. And okay, well, what would that mean about you if that didn't happen?
Yeah.
And that answer to that question is telling you what's actually going on under the surface. So if they're like, well, it would mean that, maybe some way I'll fail my family. Okay, well, if you failed your family, what would that mean about you? Exactly. It's just what therapist questions that I would ask. And so you kind of get down, keep going down. The root's going to come down to some unresolved negative belief system that they have. Would mean that maybe I'm not good enough, or I'm not worthy to some degree, right? Or like that neighborhood is the safest neighborhood, so then I wouldn't be safe, and then my kids would grow up in an unsafe neighborhood. Like you don't really know where they're going to grow up exactly, right? But in their mind, we usually jump to the worst case scenarios.
Yeah,
so if I don't get that one, they're going to be homeless. That's what so even though it's not realistic, it feels real for the nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
So the what that means about you, this is just really personal. You can think about it yourself. Think about what would it mean about me if I didn't get this house, or what would it mean about me if I did get this house? Both ways, right? So if I spent the extra $100,000, I got this house, what would that mean about me?
Yeah.
Okay. And if the answer is not hard, then okay, well, whatever. Maybe it's fine. Maybe it's just an extra 100. For some people, that's a blink of their eye. For some people, that's their life savings. Exactly. And then some. And so, understanding that basis of the belief system, what does that mean about you? And then if the person wants to go further and actually resolve that and shift it, then we have to do some earlier trauma reprocessing, because that belief system comes from early on. We all see things, hear things, from our childhood that leaves an imprint on what we believe about ourselves. And sometimes events happen in our lives that make us, start to have these negative beliefs about ourselves. And I can tell you, I've worked with people that are literally on the streets all the way to the most, highest high-rise penthouse suites that people can live in. And the negative beliefs are the same. What they're worried about maybe is a little different. But the fear, for somebody that's a CEO, but maybe they've got 3 penthouses, might be, I might lose everything.
Yeah.
Right. So then I have to have the best deal, or or what? That's the question. So if I don't get this, then what?
Mm-hmm.
And that answer is going to tell a lot about the person.
Okay. So yeah, obviously, as a realtor, I wouldn't be asking them that per se, but it's good for people to maybe take that home and think about it before they write, because you're not going to write instantly, but at least I think it will help our viewers that who are going to be purchasing or whatever they may be doing if they're in multiple offers, to maybe slow down and, just as you said, what does it mean if I don't get it? Probably not the end of the world.
Yeah. And like, as the realtor, you don't have to tell me what the answer is. You might just say, hey, some of our clients really benefit when they ask themselves this question. Yeah. And so you think about this at home. You don't tell me, because I'm not your therapist, but just think about it. What would it mean about you if blank? What would it mean about you if you didn't get blank? Yeah. And then, sort of help to think about where you're going to land there.
Yeah. Because that's what I think. Like, it's funny with a lot of the purchasers that we've had, they'll not get certain ones.
Yeah.
And it's a bummer for them and on the end of that. But the thing that I've always told that, and my mom, who's also a realtor, told them as well, is
apple doesn't fall far from the tree, eh?
Yeah, grandma's one too.
Oh my God. Tell me more. But
what we tell all of our purchasers is that I've never seen anyone purchase a home and then be like, man, I should have got the first one. Like, I've never seen it. They always get done like, no, this is the one now. Right. So it's like, it's just funny, because at the time they really, really want that one. And they get upset if they don't get it. And then later on, it's funny because they finally do get the one that they want, and they don't even think about that one.
Totally.
They're not, I should have bought the blue one. They never do that. Yes. They're just happy that they got their home and they're stoked.
Yes.
So yeah, it's I like that idea to like, what does it say about me if I don't get it? And I think that most people, if they take that half a beat, will just be like, And actually, it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, but you know what does make me think about, you know, when there's been a lot of talk in the corporate world for many years now about empathy and the role that plays, like in your 9 to 5, you know, regular job for a lot of people, and as employers, and I think as a realtor, you also have this role too that. We have to be emotionally sensitive to what your clients are dealing with, and you're like, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what I might think about then is, you know, when somebody's picturing themselves, I mean, it's interesting because even the houses usually are staged that way, right? Yeah. Pictures that come down so that you want people to imagine themselves in this home, right? That's the idea. Once they're more likely to buy, they are more it feels like home, and they get this lovey-dovey feeling inside, right? Problem is there might be 50 other offers on the table for that same house, so 49 people are going to be disappointed, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we have to be really sensitive that person that doesn't get that home is going to be dealing with grief and loss.
Okay.
And they might have a wonderful relationship with grief and loss, and that's great. And then they're like, oh, that sucks, but I'll move on. Yeah. Right. But the people that are really taking it hard means that they have something probably in their past where they've had some difficult losses and grief that they had to deal with, and maybe they haven't quite dealt with yet.
Yeah.
And so, you know, there's a whole sort of path that our mind goes on. You think about, you know, imagining, you know, I've got 2 little kids at home, so like imagining, you know, this bigger home, more space, and I can picture them running around, you know, and it's going to be so nice, and we'll do tobogganing down the little hill in the winter, and I'll be like, you're picturing your life. And then when somebody else takes that away from you, now is a loss.
Yeah, gotcha.
And so we have to be really sensitive that you know, that must be really disappointing for you. You know, you had this whole future planned out, and now it feels like it's robbed from you.
Yeah.
Right. And when you can name that out loud for the client, they're going to, oh, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. And then there's some space created. And then slowly you could say, you know, and you know, I've had at this point in my career, I don't know, 1,000 clients or whatever it is for you. You see that often. But what tends to happen is, you know, you're going to find a better place. It's actually somehow going to be even better for you than this one. I don't know how it's going to happen, but it's going to happen. That's sort of like hope, and you can kind of instill that. But one thing that we want to, I think, do is you don't want to invalidate those feelings of grief and loss, because that's very, very important to just sort of honor the space of that and help them kind of take it more gently for themselves.
Nice. Which is also good. Nice segue. Thanks, man.
Yeah. Welcome.
Because that can be stressful. Like, as I said before, there's conflicts that we have to de-escalate in the landlord and tenancy. There's not exactly conflicts, but in purchasing, you know, dealing with loss there and not getting what you want all the time, or not being able to get to the price that you want. All sorts of things. These can be really stressing.
Yeah.
What are some good methods to sort of get your woosah there and chill out a bit? Because as you touched on earlier, you get into that stressful, not thinking, not using all your logic and stuff, and start making weird decisions. And again, as you touched on earlier, that it's your life savings in a lot of cases. Like, that's one of the things with real estate and investment and all that. Like, we are not playing with chump change here. Like, well over $500,000, well into $1 million in many cases. Mm-hmm. This isn't chump change. It can be stressful. Yeah. So what are some good methods to sort of help relax a little bit, other than drinking a shit ton of bourbon?
Yes. Or not token before you have the meeting.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things. So one is during high stress. Mm-hmm. There's something that you can do. It's called 7-Eleven breathing.
Okay.
I'll demonstrate it with you if you would like,
sure,
and we can listeners and viewers can check it out. A lot of these will be on my channel. So 7-Eleven breathing essentially is your 7-Eleven, easy to remember, just like the corner store, right? So 7 means you're breathing in through your nose for 7 seconds, or as much as you can do. If you can only do 5, then just do 5. But it's breathing in through 7 seconds. You know, and I'll demonstrate with you in a second. And then you're going to exhale for 11 seconds. Essentially, you want it all the way out. So 11 seconds through your mouth.
Okay.
Right. So it's pretty inconspicuous, but probably somebody will kind of notice if you're like right here and you're.
Right.
So I might recommend if you have a moment, maybe step into a washroom or another room or your car or somewhere where you need to go and you be a little bit more private. Okay, so we'll do it together. So we'll breathe in for 7 seconds through your nose. And out through your mouth. Through your nose. Out through your mouth. Yeah.
I wasn't stressed before, but that's all good.
Yeah, that's good. If you are stressed, what you'll notice is that your nervous system will come down quite a bit, because during a high, when you're in that yellow zone, that fight or flight, or even the red zone, what's happening is you're breathing a lot faster, right? Because your body's getting ready to run away from a saber-toothed tiger.
Yeah.
Right?
It's
So
like old brain, right? Like
exactly. It's the limbic system. Holy shit, I'm in trouble here. Is basically what your nervous system is saying. So what happens is you breathe in a lot, and your blood's getting all this oxygen, so you can pump all this extra blood to your limbs so you can get out of here. It stops your digestion, so you can go run or fight if you have to.
Yeah.
So what we actually do with the longer exhalation, we end up getting less oxygen into our system, so that actually balances things out.
Okay.
So then you're more in that like calm, rest and digest stage, right? So if you were to do that, say 5-10 times in a row, there is a much better than likely, percentage chance that you would be feeling a lot better.
Cool.
It looks a little weird though, so you're probably not going to be doing this in the middle of a negotiation. Just a second, right? You're not going to do that. What you're probably going to want to do is something a little bit more inconspicuous.
Yeah.
And this is something I picked up from somebody named Gabby Bernstein, who's just a terrific, individual. I call it tongue decompressions, and I don't know what she calls it, but it's really inconspicuous. You can't tell you're doing it. You can't really talk while you're doing it, but if you're just listening and you're sort of in a moment, you can do this in 30 seconds or less, and you can feel a lot calmer. So what this is if you notice where your tongue is at most rest states, like where is it sitting right now for you?
Kind of behind my teeth.
Right up at the top of your roof of your mouth, behind your teeth. And if you kind of zoom into yourself, you'll notice that your throat is kind of closed a little bit, and you're a little bit more, the more relaxed you are, you won't notice a lot of difference. But if you're stressed, you really notice it. And sometimes people lose like a little bit of their throat, they kind of make a different sound. Yeah. And so if you notice that, you also notice if you're stressed, you're thirsty, and there's all kinds of saliva is kind of, you can't find it, you're looking for some water kind of thing, like, oh my god, your hands are shaking. So you notice your tongue's at the top of your mouth. So tongue decompressions is to relax your tongue, let it fall to the floor of your mouth. Okay, and if you picture yourself doing that, you can't see what I'm doing. I'll do it though. I'll demonstrate.
Yeah, just
can't tell, right? It looks the same. Tongue up, tongue down.
Yeah,
it's the same. So it's very conspicuous. What we do here, though, as your tongue is down here, this is the same. It sort of stimulates in your vagus nerve, which is a very important nerve. It literally attaches like every organ in your body. Yeah. When you're sleeping, this is part of what happens when people start snoring, right? You like lay down, like I don't snore, and then as soon as you actually fall asleep, your spouse, like mine, is like, you snore a lot, Robert.
I just had this conversation. Yes.
Okay, sorry, hitting too close to home. But yeah, so you're relaxing your throat will expand a little bit. You might notice your sinuses opening up a little bit, right? Yeah. And you'll be breathing a little bit better. So your throat will sort of respond as well, probably, and your jaw also might relax a little bit too, so you might just open up a tiny bit. If you do
put in the tongue down, I can feel the throat.
It feels opening a little bit. If you then focus on breathing slowly, you don't have to think 7-Eleven for this, just nice and slow, easy, regular breaths, just really regular, just concentrate on that. As you're doing that, you're telling your body to calm itself down. And if you want to go the extra mile, you can do a couple different things. You can do just a couple of thoughts that you might say to you that are completely 100% true. Yeah. Right? Not like, I am, whatever, I'll make it up. You don't want to say like, I'm like super wealthy if you're really not, because that doesn't feel really real, right? You have to be something that you feel really, really, really true about, like, I'm alive right now. Yeah. Right? And like, I'm safe in this moment. Right? Yeah. I'm alive. That feels really true. So as you tongue down, you're thinking to yourself something really good, or like, people love me, or something like that. Yeah. then that feels calming. And if you happen to be alone and you want to go the extra mile, you can make a sound. But this sounds a little bit weird if you're like in a negotiation.
Yeah.
But essentially, when you make certain sounds, it actually helps your inner ear. There's a vibration thing that happens with the little bones in your ear. I forget what they're called. And this just can stimulate your vagus nerve further. So you might see like people like in meditations, and like, like hum, that kind of thing. That you're not going to show up to your meetings like like that.
That'd be very strange.
I would still leave that part out. But if you just
unless you work for Lululemon, you can probably
sure, yeah. If you're gonna change your branding, right?
Right?
Yeah.
Well, you know that's a good like thing because like the negotiations aren't fast and you know what I mean. Offer comes in, gets digested and all that, but as I say, like it can be really stressful. So I think people using these, 7-11 breathing and
tongue
decompression and all that stuff, because they're going to be chilling in their living room, figuring out how they want to counter this. But it'd be a good idea to maybe calm down a little bit before you respond, because that's what I see sometimes, especially on the sales side, that a seller will have a certain number that they want. And obviously the buyer is trying to get less than that because they're trying to save money, which makes sense. But some sellers get really pissed off. And it's like, take a beat, man. Like, that they're trying to get a deal. They're not trying to make you angry. But when we go and purchase, we're going to try to do the same thing. Right?
Correct.
Calm down.
Yes.
Right? Because I've seen certain sellers, for instance, there's I'm just not going to counter that. I'm upset, screw those guys kind of thing. It's like, maybe if you take a beat and you can counter it at asking again, whatever you want to do, but calm down a bit and think a little bit more, because you'll be more successful if you're thinking. Weird, right?
Yes. And for the record, never tell somebody to calm down. It's just never ever works.
Really?
Yeah.
Weird.
Ask my kid.
Yeah. Right? Yeah.
I love you, Liam.
Yeah. It's fine.
Yeah. No, but I think you validate. It's the same things earlier in the show. You validate. Clearly you're really upset. I know that you want the best deal. You want to make the best you want to make the most on this deal. I totally get it.
Yeah.
And already that person should feel a little bit more heard and validated. Right?
Of course. Yeah. Because we're all, especially when you're working with a seller, we are on the same team. Yeah. I am working for you.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So,
I like what you did when you phrased it, when you're going to go buy after this, we're going to get this, we're going to do the same thing.
Yeah.
So you're helping to put that person in the shoes of the others, empathize with the buyers in that situation. Right. Yeah. So, okay, I kind of get it. And sort of that empathy may, not necessarily, but it may help to, bring the nervous system down a little bit. But yeah, if they have some other tools or techniques, like meditation can be really helpful, or going for a long walk or something like that before you make a decision. Yeah. Those sorts of things are really helpful. But I also say that if you notice this is a pattern, it's like a 1 or 2 times, okay, whatever, it's stressful and you're fine. But if it's every time, especially you see people that buy multiple homes or multiple properties or different things, you might notice a pattern here, and it might be roots of a deeper thing to work through. So it might be important to take a look at that with a qualified professional.
Yeah, for sure. Well, wicked, man. I think we got through most of our ways. I really appreciate you helping with the de-escalation in particular, because that is one of those things. You open up any paper, you can always see that there's some sort of landlord-tenant fight happening, or anywhere, online, we're just bombarded with it. So it's a good practice for people to learn how to de-escalate things and come to a favorable solution for everybody. Because ultimately it's all about relationships. And if you have a good relationship with your tenant, then everything's going to go smoothly and they'll be happy and they'll take care of your stuff, like your house.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a good method to de-escalate to that. So thank you very much for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
We'll make sure to have a link to your show in our description as well, so you can check out Rob's show as well. So thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
That's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Wicked. And this has been Bamboo, Vancouver's property management and investment podcast.